Hi everyone. So today, we're diving into something that makes most of us squirm, discomfort. Now, I want you to take a deep breath with me, because this isn't just a topic, it's an invitation. We live in a culture that worships comfort. We scroll past pain, skip the hard conversations, and curate perfection. But here's the truth, and I want you to write this on your heart. Growth and comfort do not coexist. You cannot evolve, lead, create, or connect meaningfully if you are not willing to be uncomfortable. The moments that define us, the breakthroughs, the big leaps, the healing, never come wrapped in cozy blankets. They come wrapped in uncertainty, fear, and yes, vulnerability. We were talking about courage in the classroom, and one teacher raised her hand and said, I think we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if we want to do this work well. And that line? It hit me like a lightning bolt. Because she was absolutely right. Let's break this down. We've been taught that vulnerability is something to avoid. But when you say I don't know in a meeting, or I made a mistake as a leader, that's not weakness. That's courage. It's uncomfortable, yes. But it's how trust is built. It's how innovation happens. It's how we create spaces where people feel safe to be real. Think about a time you learned something new. Maybe you learned how to lead a team, how to set boundaries, how to forgive someone. Was it comfortable? Absolutely not. It was probably messy, confusing, awkward. But that tension? That was your mind and your heart stretching. That's what growth feels. Here's the tough one: discomfort is often the price of meaningful connection. Having the hard conversation. Owning the impact of our actions. Sitting in silence with someone's pain without trying to fix it. These are uncomfortable moments, but they're the ones that build trust and empathy. And you know what? Discomfort is data. When you feel that tightness in your chest or that need to run, pause. That's not a reason to quit. That's a sign that something important is happening. When we show up as our whole selves, even when it's scary, we invite others to do the same. That's how we build brave spaces. Not safe spaces where we avoid discomfort, but brave spaces where we work through it, together. So here's my invitation to you today. Don't chase comfort. Chase courage. Say the thing that matters. Ask the question that scares you. Raise your hand. Try the thing you might fail at. Because if you want a life of meaning, growth, and connection, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Thank you. Would you like a shorter version of this speech for a quick talk or Instagram reel style post? We grow up learning to associate strength with control, certainty, and self-sufficiency. We're taught to toughen up, to keep our feelings in check, and to never show our hand. Somewhere along the way, we start to believe that being vulnerable means being weak. That asking for help is a flaw. That admitting fear or uncertainty is a liability. But nothing could be further from the truth. Vulnerability, in its rawest form, is not weakness, it's courage in action. You see, vulnerability is the willingness to show up and be seen when you can't control the outcome. It's about entering situations where your heart is exposed, where you could be misunderstood, judged, hurt, and choosing to show up anyway. That choice? That's bravery. That's grit. And it's the birthplace of innovation, creativity, connection, and growth. Think about it. When was the last time you did something truly meaningful in your life that didn't require vulnerability? Maybe it was telling someone you loved them for the first time, applying for a job you weren't sure you'd get, or opening up to a friend about something deeply personal. Those moments carry risk. They carry emotional exposure. They carry uncertainty. And yet we keep coming back to them because they're where real life happens. The truth is, we can't selectively numb emotion. When we shut down vulnerability to avoid pain, we also shut down joy, belonging, and love. When we armor up to protect ourselves from disappointment, we also block ourselves from receiving genuine connection. It's a paradox. The thing we're trying to avoid, pain, rejection, failure, is often what we have to face in order to experience the things we want most: trust, growth, intimacy. In our personal lives, vulnerability looks like saying I'm sorry when you're wrong, or I need help when you're overwhelmed. It's deciding to have the hard conversation instead of letting resentment build. It's setting a boundary, knowing full well that some people might not like it. It's sharing your story, not to seek sympathy, but to stand in your truth. These aren't easy choices, but they're powerful ones. They're the kinds of choices that build resilience, because every time we choose courage over comfort, we reinforce to ourselves that we are capable of facing life as it is, not just when it's easy. In leadership, vulnerability is even more critical. We often expect our leaders to be decisive, confident, and composed. But if that's all they ever show us, we don't trust them. Why? Because we know it's not the whole story. We crave authenticity in our leaders. We want to know they care. We want to know they're human. A leader who can say, "I don't have all the answers, but I'm committed to figuring it out with you," creates a culture of trust and psychological safety. That kind of vulnerability sets the tone for creativity, collaboration, and honest feedback. In education and learning spaces, vulnerability is just as essential. For a student to raise their hand and say, "I don't understand," they have to feel safe enough to be vulnerable. For a teacher to admit that a lesson didn't land, and ask for feedback from students, that's vulnerability. And when we normalize that, we don't just improve performance, we foster belonging. We create environments where it's okay to be a work in progress. Where mistakes are part of the process, not a reason for shame. And that's how you build real learning communities. One of the greatest myths we carry is that we must always be strong, stoic, and self-contained to succeed. But vulnerability reminds us that strength looks different than we thought. Sometimes it looks like crying in the car after a long day and still choosing to show up for your team. Sometimes it looks like being the first to say, "I forgive you." Sometimes it looks like sitting with someone in their pain, with nothing to offer but your presence. These moments might not seem heroic on the surface, but they are deeply courageous. They require you to be present with your full, messy, imperfect humanity and to let others see that, too. I want to be clear, vulnerability is not about oversharing or putting everything out there for everyone to see. It's not about emotional dumping. It's about intention. Vulnerability is about choosing to be open in a way that serves connection, not performance. It's about being honest when it matters, with people who've earned the right to hear your story. And it's about living in alignment with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. We live in a world that's quick to label emotion as weakness and armor as power. But if we want to raise resilient children, lead with integrity, love wholeheartedly, and create communities that heal instead of harm, we have to rewrite that narrative. We have to remember that real strength is not about how well we hide our feelings, it's about how bravely we can face them. And how compassionately we can hold space for others to do the same. So the next time you feel that flutter in your chest, the fear, the awkwardness, the temptation to shut down, pause. Notice it. Then take one small, brave step forward. Because that is vulnerability. And that is courage in action. Let me know if you want this turned into a classroom handout or something visually styled for a slide presentation. Discomfort is something most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. We design routines to keep ourselves feeling secure, surround ourselves with people who agree with us, and build habits that minimize uncertainty. It's completely natural, our brains are wired to seek comfort and avoid pain. But what if the very thing we spend so much time resisting is the thing we most need in order to grow? It's one of life's greatest paradoxes, we only grow when we step outside of our comfort zones. That means discomfort isn't a detour from growth, it is the path. Think about any moment in your life that fundamentally shaped who you are today. Was it easy? Was it predictable? Or did it involve challenge, uncertainty, or even failure? Discomfort doesn't always come with a warning. It shows up in moments like your first public speech when your heart is pounding, or when you walk into a new school or job, unsure if you belong. It shows up in honest conversations when your voice shakes and your palms sweat, or when you finally decide to set a boundary with someone, knowing it might disappoint them. These are not comfortable experiences, but they are transformative ones. The discomfort is not the enemy. It is evidence that you are in motion. Too often, we wait for change to feel safe before we move forward. We wait until we're fully ready. Until we're confident. But the truth is, you don't build confidence first, you build it through action. Through showing up again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Imagine a student learning a new subject. At first, it's frustrating. They make mistakes. They might feel embarrassed or even want to quit. But that resistance they feel? That's not a sign they're failing, it's a sign they're learning. Growth is supposed to feel like effort. It's supposed to feel unfamiliar. That doesn't mean something's wrong. It means something's working. The same is true in our personal lives. When we challenge the narratives we've believed about ourselves for years, it can be incredibly uncomfortable. Maybe you're stepping out of a role you've played in your family or in your career, and suddenly, the old patterns don't fit anymore. That transition period between who you were and who you're becoming is deeply uncomfortable. But it's also sacred. It's the space where growth happens. It's where you begin to rebuild, realign, and rediscover yourself. Discomfort also plays a huge role in how we relate to others. Honest communication is uncomfortable. Admitting when we've caused harm is uncomfortable. Receiving feedback is uncomfortable. But all of these things are crucial if we want to build authentic relationships. If we only stick to what's easy and familiar, we stay shallow. We miss the depth that only vulnerability and truth can bring. There's a reason courage and discomfort go hand in hand. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to act in spite of it. And courage never feels comfortable. We often look at people who seem brave and assume that they don't feel fear, that they're somehow built differently. But they're not. They've just trained themselves to tolerate discomfort in service of something greater. They've learned to lean in when every instinct tells them to pull away. In leadership, discomfort is the price of accountability. It's standing in front of your team and saying, "I made a mistake, and I take full responsibility." It's being willing to have hard conversations, to hear the things you might not want to hear. But leaders who avoid discomfort end up avoiding growth for themselves and their teams. The best leaders are the ones who are willing to sit in the tension and say, "This is hard. And we're going to work through it together." Even in our culture, growth often starts with discomfort. Social change doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens when people are brave enough to disrupt the status quo, to speak truths that make others uncomfortable, and to challenge systems that benefit from silence. Progress is uncomfortable by nature. But staying silent or stagnant just to keep the peace, that doesn't create growth. That creates resentment, disconnection, and injustice. We all want transformation, but we forget that transformation often looks like discomfort before it looks like results. We want the breakthrough, but we're not always willing to go through the breakdown that precedes it. But that's what growth asks of us. It asks us to be uncomfortable. To sit in the unknown. To tolerate the messiness of becoming. And let's be clear, this isn't about pushing yourself to the edge or embracing suffering for the sake of it. It's not about being reckless. It's about recognizing that discomfort, when it's grounded in purpose and aligned with your values, is a signpost pointing toward growth. It's a signal that you're on the edge of something important. So the next time you feel yourself wanting to retreat from discomfort, whether it's in a conversation, a challenge, a new opportunity, pause. Notice that instinct. And instead of running from it, get curious. Ask yourself, what's on the other side of this discomfort? What could I learn if I leaned in instead of backing away? Because the truth is, growth doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like doubt, awkwardness, and fear. But those feelings aren't signs you're doing something wrong, they're signs you're doing something brave. You are capable of more than you know. But you will never discover that within the walls of comfort. You discover it in the stretch. In the stumble. In the choice to show up fully, even when it's hard. Discomfort isn't a punishment. It's a teacher. And if you're willing to listen, it can lead you to the most powerful version of yourself. Let me know if you'd like this shaped into a lesson plan, discussion guide, or visual format like slides or posters. Shame is one of the most powerful and painful emotions we experience as human beings. It's that deep, internal sense that we're flawed, that we're not enough, and that if people really knew us, if they knew our story, our mistakes, our struggles, they would turn away. Shame whispers that we're unworthy of love, of belonging, of connection. And it grows best in silence, secrecy, and judgment. The antidote to shame, then, isn't perfection or hiding, it's empathy. It's honesty. It's being brave enough to engage in the kinds of conversations we'd rather avoid. Shame resilience begins in uncomfortable conversations, because those are the moments when we take shame from something that isolates us and begin to transform it into something that connects us. It's easy to talk about light things, celebrations, wins, pleasant memories. But when we're struggling with shame, those aren't the conversations we need most. We need someone to sit with us in our discomfort. We need to be seen, not just in our strengths, but in our moments of doubt, guilt, failure, or fear. And that means someone has to go first. Someone has to be willing to say, "This is hard for me to talk about," or "I don't know how this will land, but I need to say it anyway." Those first steps are often shaky. Our voices tremble. Our hearts race. But when we speak shame aloud, especially in the presence of someone who responds with empathy instead of judgment, that shame begins to lose its grip. The idea of talking about shame is, in itself, uncomfortable. We've been taught to bury it, to distract ourselves, or to pretend it doesn't exist. We wear masks to hide it. We use humor, overwork, control, or disengagement to manage it. But avoidance is not resilience. Resilience comes from the choice to face the discomfort and to do something different. It comes from choosing honesty over avoidance, connection over isolation, and curiosity over fear. Shame resilience doesn't mean we never feel shame again. It means we learn how to move through it without being defined or destroyed by it. And one of the most powerful ways we build that resilience is by talking about what we're feeling with people who can hold space for us. That doesn't mean just anyone. It means people who've earned the right to hear our stories. People who won't try to fix us, compare us, or minimize our experience. It means the people who know how to simply say, "I'm here. I see you. And I'm not going anywhere." Sometimes those uncomfortable conversations are with others, and sometimes they're with ourselves. It's incredibly difficult to sit with our own mistakes, to take responsibility without spiraling into self-loathing. But that's the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." Guilt can be a healthy signal that helps us align with our values. Shame, if left unchecked, keeps us stuck. The more we talk about it, the more we can start to untangle that difference and treat ourselves with the same compassion we would offer someone else. In workplaces, families, and communities, shame shows up in subtle ways. It hides behind perfectionism, defensiveness, and silence. When people don't feel safe to admit mistakes or to share struggles, shame flourishes. But when leaders and educators create cultures where people are allowed to be human, where they can say, "I messed up" or "I'm having a hard time," shame begins to lose its power. Those cultures aren't built overnight. They are built one conversation at a time. Conversations where we risk vulnerability in the service of truth. Conversations where we choose connection, even when it's uncomfortable. And those conversations are not easy. It's hard to talk about how we've hurt others. It's hard to sit with someone else's pain when we don't have answers. It's hard to admit that we're struggling with something we think we should have already figured out. But avoiding those conversations doesn't protect us. It keeps us from growing. It keeps us from healing. The discomfort we feel is not a sign that we're doing something wrong, it's a sign that we're doing something brave. I remember once hearing someone say that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, "I'll try again tomorrow." Shame resilience isn't built in one big, dramatic moment. It's built in those small, daily choices to tell the truth, to stay open, and to keep showing up even when it's hard. It's built in the moment when you say, "This might be messy, but I'm willing to talk about it." And when that vulnerability is met with empathy, it changes us. It reminds us that we are not alone. That we are not the only ones struggling. That we are worthy of love and connection, even in our most human moments. So if you find yourself facing a conversation that makes your stomach turn or your throat tighten, take a breath. Remind yourself that this discomfort is not dangerous, it's necessary. It's part of what it means to live wholeheartedly. Because the goal is not to live a life without shame, it's to build the resilience to recognize it, name it, speak it, and move through it with courage. And that journey almost always begins with a conversation we'd rather not have. The beautiful thing is that every time we choose to lean in instead of pulling away, we build not just resilience, but trust. Trust in ourselves, in others, and in the relationships that matter most. And that trust becomes the foundation on which we can live, love, lead, and learn with our whole hearts. Let me know if you'd like this adapted into a journal prompt, classroom activity, or a visual storyboard. We often talk about authenticity like it's a trait we either have or we don't, like some people are just naturally real and others are just faking their way through life. But authenticity isn't a fixed quality. It's not something we're born with or without. It's a daily practice, a choice we make over and over again to show up as we truly are, not as we think we should be. And the truth is, that choice is rarely comfortable. In fact, authenticity doesn't just survive in uncomfortable moments, it thrives in them. It's easy to be authentic when everything is going smoothly. When we feel confident, accepted, and in control, being real doesn't feel like a risk. But those aren't the moments that define our authenticity. The moments that truly test us, the ones that invite us to grow, are the ones that make us feel exposed, uncertain, or afraid. Those are the moments when we're tempted to hide behind a role, a title, a mask, or someone else's expectations. And those are the moments when choosing to stay grounded in who we are takes the most courage. We are taught early on to fit in. We learn to read the room, to adjust ourselves in ways that make other people more comfortable. We hide parts of ourselves that feel too much, or not enough. We become masterful at shapeshifting, not because we're dishonest, but because we're human. We all want to belong. We all want to be liked. But fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. Fitting in is about becoming who others want us to be. Belonging is about being accepted for who we already are. And the only way to experience true belonging is to be authentic. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Uncomfortable moments have a way of shaking loose all the armor we've built around ourselves. They reveal what we really value, what we're afraid of, and what we're willing to risk for the sake of integrity. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting when you disagree with the majority, or choosing not to laugh at a joke that doesn't align with your values, or saying no to something that everyone else says yes to, those moments are defining. They're uncomfortable, not because we are doing something wrong, but because we are doing something brave. Authenticity in those moments means telling the truth, even when it's awkward. It means showing emotion, even when it feels risky. It means acknowledging your limitations, your mistakes, and your hopes, even when you don't know how they'll be received. It doesn't mean saying everything you think without a filter. It means choosing honesty that is rooted in self-awareness and aligned with your values. And that takes work. It takes the willingness to stay present in discomfort instead of escaping into who we think we're supposed to be. One of the biggest myths about authenticity is that it's always received with open arms. It's not. Sometimes when we're honest, people get uncomfortable. Sometimes when we're real, we don't get the reaction we hoped for. And sometimes, authenticity comes with consequences. But the alternative, betraying ourselves in order to be accepted, is far more costly. Because when we abandon our truth to make others more comfortable, we don't just lose their respect, we lose our own. When we consistently choose authenticity, even when it's uncomfortable, we begin to develop a deep kind of self-trust. We begin to know, in our bones, that we can handle hard things without losing ourselves. And that trust becomes a foundation for resilience. It becomes the voice inside us that says, "This is scary, but I know who I am." And when we have that kind of inner clarity, we're better equipped to handle rejection, criticism, and failure because our worth is no longer up for debate. In relationships, authenticity is what creates real intimacy. Surface-level connection might be easier, but it doesn't nourish us. When we allow ourselves to be seen in our messiness, in our doubts and imperfections, we invite others to do the same. And that mutual vulnerability builds trust, not just between people, but within communities. It's how we create spaces where people feel safe to bring their full selves, not just the polished, presentable parts. The workplace is another place where authenticity is both crucial and uncomfortable. We often feel the pressure to be overly professional, to keep emotions out of the room, to show confidence even when we're struggling. But authenticity in leadership, admitting when you don't know something, showing empathy, owning up to mistakes, creates cultures of transparency and psychological safety. When people feel they can be real without being punished for it, they engage more deeply, they take creative risks, and they support one another more honestly. The same principle applies in education, parenting, activism, anywhere humans are trying to grow or connect. Authenticity isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about the willingness to say, "This is who I am," and I'm showing up anyway. And that's not just brave, it's transformational. It's important to remember that authenticity is not static. It's a moving target because we are constantly evolving. What felt true for you 5 years ago might not feel true now. And that's okay. Part of living authentically is being willing to update your story, to question your assumptions, and to grow into new versions of yourself. That, too, is uncomfortable. But it's also necessary. Authenticity isn't about having it all figured out. It's about being honest about where you are and staying open to who you're becoming. So the next time you find yourself in a moment that feels uncomfortable, when your instinct is to perform, to please, to retreat, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what does authenticity look like right now? Maybe it looks like speaking the truth. Maybe it looks like setting a boundary. Maybe it looks like staying silent for a moment so you can figure out what feels real. Whatever it is, choose it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if it doesn't land perfectly. Because in those moments, the shaky, sweaty, uncertain ones, you are planting the seeds of something real. And over time, those seeds grow into a life that is rooted, not in performance, but in presence. Not in approval, but in alignment. And that kind of life may not always be comfortable. But it will always be true. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a podcast script, classroom discussion guide, or part of a series.